Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cross-Pollinations, a curatorial research platform that explores relationships between poetry and healthcare. And it is funded by the League of Canadian Poets, the Health Arts Research Centre, and the Canadian Association for Health Humanities. I'm Mick Jones. I'm a poet and I curate this reading series. And tonight I am totally thrilled to be joined by poet Eileen Myles for a reading in solidarity with Palestine and to think through what it means to write a healthy political poem. After Eileen reads, there will be a Q&A. It might be a little shorter because of our delayed start. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to go ahead and drop those questions in the chat and we'll try to get through as many as we can. I'm joining today from Toronto, also known as Toronto, land that belongs to many Indigenous nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, the Wendat First Nations, and so many others. June this month is National Indigenous History Month in Canada, and there are a few events I wanted to share. Toronto Public Library is offering many free creative writing workshops in celebration. And then there's also the Two-Spirit and Indigenous Pride happening this Sunday afternoon on Church Street. And our federal government's website says this is a time to research the lived experience of Indigenous peoples, which really is something we should be doing always. So we can be informed on things like our government's failed pledge to end all long-term public drinking water advisories on First Nations reserves by March 2021. Neskantaga First Nation is an Anishinaabe community north of Ontario's Thunder Bay, and they have not had clean drinking water since before I was born. Their boil water advisory has been going on for 11,101 days and counting. That's over 30 years. Colonial violence continues here today in many more ways than this. Withholding resources is a colonial tactic of genocide. We can also see this unfolding right now in Palestine. And tonight is a reading in solidarity with Palestine and against genocide. Yes, this reading is free to attend, but please action your solidarity by donating what you usually spend on a ticket to a reading or film, or ideally more than that, to the funds that I'm going to link in the chat. The first link goes toward Neskantaga First Nation, and the second is a GoFundMe I discovered through Eileen. It's to support the Gaza-based poet and translator Batul Abu Aklin and their family, whose home was bombed and destroyed by the Israeli military. If you do donate, please post in the Zoom chat right now and also include where you're signing on from and who you donated to, and if you want to, how much you donated. And we're hoping that this can build some collective fundraising momentum throughout this reading. I'm going to link those in one right now. And I'm also going to link those events for Indigenous Heritage Month in the chat as well, if anyone would like to return to those. And now I have the honor to introduce tonight's guest, poet Eileen Myles. Eileen has been publishing their work since 1978, primarily poetry, but they write in other forms as well. Novels, art journalism, opera libretti, plays, essays, even a Super 8 puppet road film. Eileen has released a lot of books, 25 and counting. They are the editor of multiple anthologies. Their most recent, Pathetic Literature, provided me a more comprehensive and compelling education than any university course I ever took. They've received many awards, including a Guggenheim Fellowship, and Eileen even ran for president in 1992. You know that Zoe Leonard poem, I Want to Dyke for President? Yeah, that's about Eileen. They live in New York and Marfa, Texas. I've been lucky enough to study with them, but before that, for at least a decade, Eileen's work permitted me access to my own experience, both as a fellow trans person and a poet, access deeper than I'd ever known. I'll just say that they are my favorite living writer and that their work and life and outlook have been an inspiration to so many, myself included. I continue to learn a lot from them. When Eileen and I were first talking about tonight's event, they wrote to me saying, "Poetry, as I understand it, is a tool of peace and a way of examining how to be a responsible citizen in my country at this time." What they wrote reminded me of a passage from my favorite of their novels, Inferno, The passage is about making art on the AIDS crisis while Bush was president in the 90s, and the poet's task being to restore meaning to words, particularly in a time of official lies. And I'm going to share that quote with everyone. I wasn't surprised to see politicians wanting to take money away from the art that was explicitly talking about this entire reality of ours. It seemed like the real desire for them, the politicians, was to have no description. That's what they would pay. That's what they would have paid for. So first you had Ronald Reagan eating jelly beans, and now you had this guy, Bush, doing their business, wars or whatever, behind the scenes, and meanwhile propagating a giant nothing, which has become a something the government and the media have only perfected since then. To a very large extent, people don't even know. I mean, it's kind of the great product of this country, the American way, a big nothing, a cataclysmic unawareness in the face of evil. And artists were getting defunded, fired essentially for speaking the truth. It was horrible. It was shocking, but I had always gotten fired, so it just seemed normal to me. I think this passage points to how Eileen's gaze destabilizes the obvious, which is a revolutionary tool. It also points to how their writing is altogether alive and harmonic and essentially social in nature. Reading them is the same as watching a film when the score comes in to light up a feeling, but it's the place of life that Eileen scores, and with a rhythmic vivacity and rolling vantage that compels the attention. Their writing is intriguing, erotic, uncomfortable, necessary. It enters the nervous system almost stealthily to animate poetry's continued relevance. Or, as Eileen writes, how the material of poems is energy itself, not even language. Words come later. If you haven't read any of Eileen's work yet, I urge you to go pick up their selected works. It's called I Must Be Living Twice, or their cult classic novel, Chelsea Girls. See for yourself how theirs is a poetry that surges a present tense thick with possibility and impossibly intimate. Please join me in welcoming Eileen Myles.
Hi, Mick. Thank you so much for everything you just said. And I couldn't be happier to be here. And I will just say, like in the middle of all this kind of awfulness, one nice thing has happened, which is in New York, we have suddenly potentially a really cool mayor, young Zoran Mamdani, a 33-year-old cool Middle Eastern extraction person, like ran a brilliant campaign about caring about people and talking in complicated ways about what's going on in Gaza. And it's, very, very like weepy. Great. So, like I just, I guess I want to, I just want to say, Canada, this is my health. Poetry is my health. And it's always been that way. I come from a sick country. I come from a sick family, and I think poetry, since my youngest, was sort of a cry for help in a way. And as I learned more about poetry, it became more complicated and more rhythmic. And I think as I came into political consciousness, I started to figure out ways if things that are construed as political are what I'm looking at, then they become part of my work. And so I'm just going to mostly just read my poems, maybe say a few things about them. But I did find myself thinking about, like when I was in college, I encountered the term ekphrastic, meaning a poem that's about a painting. And I don't know why, like beyond that first exposure, I always thought of it as a very corny word, because it was like, when aren't you looking at art? You know what I mean? It's sort of like, stop everything and look at art. And it just struck me today looking at the poems that I'm going to read for you, because I'm reading very specifically poems that I've written during the time of Gaza being bombed, and thought, well, why is that not ekphrastic? It's sort of like poems written, if war is the art of America, then why are these not poems about art too? So the first one is called Intention, and it's a poem I don't read much, even though it was the first poem I wrote. I wrote it like a week after October 7th, and there was an eclipse, and it was so weird that week. And I was in Texas, where it was particularly, it was a really good place to watch it from. And eclipses are actually very scary and weird because you feel like, you know, like the sun has been taken away and there's this feeling of enormous power being withheld. And it struck me as it feeling a lot like what was going on politically. So, and there was a moment that's sort of complicated, and I'll stop and even talk about it when I get there. So this is called the intention. I wonder if just anything can be poetry, and anything after that, a new day, if you spoke to it, composed of millions of tiny little fronds, moments when I thought, that I thought I would like to think in Spanish. Will somebody teach me to do that? They can put Spanish next to me, in me, but will it take? I thought I can create some kind of narrative intention to make the stray things great. The shaking ferns of my tree had the eclipsing sun, an incredible force. Not I, but everything is softer exactly when everything is worse. I keep writing about everything. It must be the subject, the something off stage pushing to produce this, a heinous act equivalent in some way to taking a shit. Undoubtedly a shit of violence, but I know, why don't you? If you ate what I ate when sun began looking kind of funny, but the shit began last week, health, astral, bodies, war. I was hoping she'd ask if I was military. They don't ask that. And you know, that's very big in America. I don't know if it happens in Canada. Like you get to the airport and they say, are you military? And I was just like, why don't they ask me that in a cafe, you know? They don't ask that in a cafe. I'm against war, I'm ready to say, which in America is almost like saying I'm against shitting. She said she has to work so hard on hers. She probably needs some kind of group. It's about noticing, I said, noticing me for what I am, not what I do. I can't stop. There was one of those ink splot moments. It could only be moments. There's no better word. Ink going awry. Used to be wild. Now it doesn't even exist. The kid plunging deeper and deeper into his phone. I have never seen so many dead babies, and they are all Palestinians. I'm sure there are some dead Israeli babies, but so far in this era, they are fictional. No, that's the controversial moment. I think in October 7th, in fact, there was one dead baby. I mean, that was like, but the whole thing was about 40 dead babies, baked babies, that whole, you know, they're fictional. The force that pushes the other thing into being true. A dead baby looks like a doll. His father holding him or holding him up in the air. This little guy, how far did he go with things? Being downloaded, recording life, feeling shit. He's the wrong color. The dead baby, he looks like he never had fun. And that is a lie. This kid laughed, but it is shook right out of him. And his father is shaking him now, and everyone's pointing. Do you remember that moment in the war where it was like you had never seen it before, and everybody was always going like that on your phone? This next one, it's just called them, and then in parentheses it says Palestinians, and then this one I just started to think about, you know, the agony of just doing the mundane shit of your life, and then looking at your phone and looking at these horrors and cutting back and forth. And I guess when I think about the ekphrastic thing, I think about that. They had beds in rooms, they had socks and babies, they had fire, they had a toilet, they had a book, they had school, they had mustaches and cunts and bellies, they had feet and toenails and arguments and friends, they had hot soup, they had hunger, laughter, pain, cell phones, they had kids, they missed each other, they came home. I'm not sure about this, but he was killed in his house with his family. I tie my shoes. Going to the gym through this horrific experience, I'm bringing my recyclables down. Contacting people. They try every few minutes to call people in Gaza. My toe hurts. I struck it against the edge of a chair in Tempe. Many medical journals write about genocide in Gaza and think it's okay. I have nothing for the baby. I randomly sob. We're not seeing the support of the medical community. They ignore the calls. They don't say Israel. He has died. They don't say he has been killed. I can't find my headphones or the band for the clamshell. I make tea tossing cards into an imaginary future in which my handwriting and my political thoughts are considered. This is prose. War is prose. The coldness of my pastimes is poetry. My safety, the what has been torn away from my fellow. My neighbors, my friends, is Palestine, is poetry. Poetry is home and the loss of it, it being robbed from a child. Or the children of the Nakba who 75 years later, an old man walking south, it's rubble, home, streaming, tears. Tears are home. The black corner of the New Yorker under the comforter, I meditate with building in a corner of his raincoat. The gentle sway of the trees out my window, like anime, Attack on Titan. The cute kids swaying hair. I think movement, that's Japanese. Am I Japanese? Am I Palestinian? Thousands and thousands of round yellow and green leaves chattering. Seeing a little bloody baby being carried. The journalist who lost his entire family. My friend, the terrorist. Shot in their car with his 3 little girls. They bombed my mother. They bombed me. Her gold hoodie, her little mouth opening and closing. The change is quick, but revolution will take a while. I'm still in my pajamas. I'm so comfortable. Home, scarves wrapped on lamps, nothing disturbed. Too full, too much tea, eggs. What else can I eat? Or disturbed by not being hungry? 2 brothers chatting as they're rolled through a hospital, chatting, bandage on one's head, the other bloody. The photograph is lit. Electricity, thank God, thank Allah. This next one, a poet, art writer friend of mine was doing like kind of an anthology or a magazine of the alphabet, and he went to all these different writers and asked them if they would take a letter, and I got K, so I wrote this poem, and it's like, it's not KKK like Ku Klux Klan, it's like K hyphen K, like that. And I think I had just been reading about whales eating krill and how there's increasingly no krill, so that whales are going to starve. Krill kill, you're the middle, arriving here and flaying, gunk, dead, splat, children with scars, all that remains like legends, the generation hoard, and trees knowledge crushed before and after, glittering day, a gray holiday. He's stolen my phone. Ralph Kramer's a lout, big bus driver with a smooth step. He died in it. He politely asked if she'd use a mask, craft, kill. AI views the neighborhood, then you get home, you're dead. Kids are dead. Your lenient spouse, the program said was fucked to death, thrown bottomless on the prison yard. He's KCL, King's College London, not a word. K, dead. The mother had no bread. He was in her body, contaminated water, and she breathed bad air. Heart stops, baby born sick. Couple of days later, he passed. The parents couldn't speak. No one pressured them. Don't speak, it's K. Sniping children, that's K. Essentially, kill, death, cut off all the food, water. Krill feeds the whale, and the ice feeds krill. The ice melts, krill die. Won't feed the whale. We die. We all die. I write to kill. And here's my most, this is so great. I'm so honored and delighted to be reading this in Canada. I wrote this poem, like, I was going to Ottawa like maybe a month ago or 2 months ago, and you know, Trump was saying his latest crazy thing about Canada and stuff. And so, but also in my life, I was, you know, like I'm always making tea and forgetting that I'm boiling water, you know, and so I kept destroying my pot, you know, and so I was like, why don't I like invest in a very expensive pot that whistles? And so I spent a lot of money, and I got this amazing pot, and I had it delivered to my building, and it was stolen. So I was like, you know, because I live in one of these buildings where for years you would never have stuff delivered here because everything was always stolen. But now I live in this building full of shoppers. It's a very, you know, like Amazon packages are like coming all day long. So I thought I could do it. And so I was just sitting on my couch feeling kind of devastated about the fact that my pot was stolen. And then suddenly I had that moment of realization, like, I can't believe I'm upset about a pot being gone in this, you know, in this political climate. So this poem is just called Poet. And there's like a word that I cross out every now and then. So when I go like this, it means cross out the word that I didn't mean to be writing. And so here it goes. And it's called Poet. Israel's started bombing Gaza again. I don't know where to put it in relation to the ordinary sadness I feel about this expensive red kettle I bought that whistles, and it arrived on Friday when I was in Columbus. They even showed me a photograph of the little square package sitting under the mailbox in my building. I mean, I have had packages stolen for years and I never got anything sent here of value, but now my building is filled with shoppers who get boxes and bags of stuff. And so I joined in and I got robbed. I'm back to Poet, boiling water in a Poet pot. And I forget Poet pot is not spelled poet, poet, pot, pot, pot. But everything is Gaza, is gone. The sweet dog, the new head, a puppy is leaning against my naked arm. We're vulnerable. Here, months ago, was it months ago, I screenshot photographs of Gaza going home. First, Trump wanted to sell it like a resort. Our president's obscene, a fucking idiot. If I had a whistling pot, I wouldn't forget the water is boiling. I wouldn't burn everything, would I? Must everything burn? If Gaza burns, must everything burn? Don't they know? Do I know? Our president is obscene. I sip my tea. Poet, pot. Poet, 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 pot. Poet, pot. Must everything burn? Oh, Canada, he says. Oh, Canada is great. Oh, Canada can be a state. Our president is a fucking idiot. Must everything burn? Oh, Canada is great. Must everything burn? Poet, poet, pot. Poet, pot. Poet, pot. Must everything burn? And Gaza's going home. Poet, pot. Poet, pot. Pot, 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 pot. Now, where am I with time? I have one extremely long poem, which is kind of not going to work. Maybe I should read for about 5 more minutes, 10 more minutes.
Yeah, like 10 more minutes. Perfect.
Okay, so I'm going to kind of skip around in this poem. And I think all I want, it's called Ballroom. And all I want you to know is that it starts like I was in a gallery in Marfa, and I was one of a group of people who were, it's very ekphrastic, this poem. I was one of a group of poets who were asked to read in this gallery and to honor a painter named Julie Speed, and her paintings were all these weird creatures, and there were like, you know, entrails coming out of their bodies. But the thing that was kind of cool was that, like, where the podium was set up, the head of the person reading covered the head of the monster, and so you would be like the human head covering these weird paintings with entrails coming out of it. Anyway, so the beginning of the poem is like that. And so, and the other thing, so it's just like, this is like a poem that starts there, and then I'm sort of wandering around in Marfa, but also it's so great because Mick mentioned Zoe Leonard, because Zoe Leonard has a show up in Marfa right now called Al Rio, and it's all about, it means to the river, and it's all about the border. So there's tons and tons of photographs of the river and surveillance, etc. And but the thing that's so funny is, of course, I ran for president, and then Zoe wrote this piece called "I Want a Dyke Poet for President. I want a poet who's a junkie. I want." So it's this incessant I want, I want, I want. So what I did in this poem is I start going, I looked at Zoe's show and I was like, I want a river full of surveillance. I want to, like I basically pushed it back at her. So it's kind of that. And then of course we wind up in Gaza. So I'm going to read for about 5 or 10 minutes. So this is ballroom. I'm amazed to be the head of some brown creature whose butt is spewing a pink ribbon of flame or their own intestine. I don't know this creature's gender and you don't know mine. There's no information here, only what I put. It greets me with nothing. Your old car, this blue day. Okay. Warmer now across from Uncle's, solid bark, real dog in the shadow, until the dog and the man in the shorts is way past. Marfa, Palestina. I need to know more. I want a photograph of the US-Mexico border. I want a lot of photographs of the surface of the river. Thousands of ripples. I want surveillance. The trust with which I put the treat in her mouth, her dog lip, her fingertips moist. One large vertical stem of the tree in front of me is white, and I can hear the sweet crackle of the leaves falling and the soft breath of distant traffic and the whoosh of close approaching the pond, blue and reflected brown. Dragging in your shadow, by myself, perfect day. I want to cut to the I want. I want the key pieces to be bulbous and smart. I want lesbianism everywhere, this wet frottage. I want an axing to the tight-faced, jammed-in sheets, old man on the mountain. I want curve, excess, pink, brown, gray. I want a whole of you, a beehive. I want the emptiness inside and folding all around. I want a round, rustle and thick spiral. I want Santa Claus faces, a smiling porpoise. I want deep-cut darkness inside. I want waters spelling letters. Give it to, what's the answer, the message? Speak, water, speak. I want your long arm relaxing. I want a tumult down there. I want a tiny hole of foam, a crest of foam, an opening, a pungent, tight knot, a wrinkly water beams, teeth. I want the wide open mouth of the river, the smooth parts, a dish of you there, a vegetable course, pushed aside and by a kid voraciously for water and life. What's that ding? Did somebody not turn off their phone? And the end of alphanumeric and the end of history. Of course, I want a river cutting through the rough, too dirty banks, an icy-looking river, a muddy walking path by its side. Bushes look like eyelashes batting the day. I want a dumb phallic monument, boundary of the United States. I want 4 trucks and kids in water. I want the shadows on the mountains. These are not family pictures, trunk open, the building up there on the hill, surveillance, colonization. Whose? I hold the child's hand. There's so many spires of connectivity. The past says, what's that? The future says, what's that? The looping wire at the top of the hurricane fence. Mountains behind dirt, I want it. I'm going to skip to Gaza. Flowers and flowers, not yet. Flowers, flowers, vegetation to the bridge at church. It looks like it's there to catch someone, and that goal, is it working or broken? I think it's a checkpoint, tires in an empty road waiting for you. Further up, blaring truck, passage, passengers, car, Límite de los Estados Unidos Mexicanos, a beautiful reflection of a trap, splayed birds of powers. Aesthetically, helicopter is a hungry dragonfly, a darning needle. They will sew up your lips. Balls of light or the horizon up close. We love it here. Mass-produced picket fence about the border. Mesmerizing. Animal yard. Wet furrows of light. Rising dark birds. Denser. Blurred passion. Speckled sky. Do we want it? Sad moon shifting through the day. That's what's up. Stand up bass. No, not that part. In a panel. Shut up. The guitar is angelic. All vowels. The genocide's only happening on my phone. It's amazing to be back to this tiny world. This is an amazing pen. The little girl had blood on her mouth. Wipe it away, said her mother. Use your hand. And then the ambulance never came. His pink shirt is great as my pen. I saw shots of a rumpled John Chamberlain ambulance, ripped and crumpled. It was beautiful. How could the little girl be bleeding in there? So hard. Two men discuss whether it's really bad. Is it evil? It's a beautiful shirt. I'm torn. Pay attention to the wrong thing. I remember people cracked up. Cars were naked on the stairs. And this is the American war of excess, us killing ourselves. Nice striped coat. The little girl is dust. It's hard to look. It's not hard to be dust. I see this old stretched skin on my calves and on my arms. I enjoy his sneakers. I want them too. The weightlifter went into prison and came back a skinny old man, limping. People here are not dying. They're happy today. They're grateful. Part of my money every day is killing these people, killing her, the little girl who was ashamed of the blood. She was telling her mother, use your hand, her mother said. Nice light pass on the woman's face, shapes, windows, feet, shoes. Part of my money makes blood. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eileen.
That was pretty raggedy. It was kind of fun though to plow through. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I love the going through all the I want, I want, I want. It has such a great rhythm, and so reminds me of what you were talking about with Zoe's, like that change and then directing it this way is incredible. Well, Eileen, I just want to also share that in the last about half an hour of you reading, we have raised about $300 for Neskantaga First Nation and over £300 for Batul. So amazing work, everyone in the audience. This is such an incredible way to redirect those funds. And thank you so much for joining in solidarity. Eileen.
Can I add one thing? I want to say Batul, who is again, Batul Ablu Akleen, her new book got released on June 16th by a publisher. It's Tenement Press. And if you follow me on Instagram, there's more information, but you can find it's called 48 Kilograms, and it's so good. It's a masterpiece book of somebody in the middle of Gaza, 20 years old today, right now. So check her out. Let's help her, but let's buy her book too.
Yes. And actually, that kind of leads to my first question as we move into our Q&A, which was, I know that you read a lot of Palestinian poets, and I'm sure everyone here would love to hear more of your reading life lately, or even more about maybe a poem that you love of Batul's.
Yes, yes, yes. Now I have to find it under this. Let's see, where is she? She is way.
I read one that you shared on your Instagram, I think either earlier today or yesterday.
I have a great one right here. And it's actually I'm reading this for a very obvious reason. It's called I Want a Grave. I want a grave with a marble tombstone. My loved ones irrigate it. They place roses on it. They weep when longing stings their eyes. Their tears can't reach me, so I don't get sad. I want a grave for myself alone so my friends can come and talk to me, so that for the last time I'll have the right to be an individual. I want a grave not adjoining any other grave, so my sweetheart can grow me a paper flower tree to shelter me from the summer sun, to clothe me in a magenta dress in spring, leaves falling on my body like a warm blanket in winter. I want a grave in a cemetery where all of my neighbors are people who have taken their fun from life, wrapped themselves in life, and then planted 2 kisses on life's cheeks and died. I want a grave. I don't want my corpse to be decomposing in the middle of the street.
That's incredible.
But
wow.
she's so good. She's so
wow.
good. Um,
And I saw you were writing a blurb for her book. So how's it been reading through it?
Reading through the book.
Yeah.
Oh my, I mean, I just was like, holy shit. This is, because again, I think we're always, as poets, we're always learning to write in the middle of things, and it's just like, the obscenity of like what I was saying of being mundane and then knowing that we have such access, but to be literally there, to be literally
Mm.
there. Like I said to her, we've been in touch a little bit on Instagram, and I said, well, is there bombing? And she was a couple of days ago. Like, like, wow. And again, she's such a wonderful, wonderful poet and weird and good, like all of us are,
Yeah.
and it's
And
like,
it's amazing that you're sharing her work to increase that reach and get more people turning to her work.
I feel blessed. I feel blessed.
And I also I was wondering if you would had any reflections or thoughts to share. I'm not sure if the audience is familiar with the Palestinian Literary Festival that I think you attended like a little while ago, right? But
Yeah.
maybe to speak a little bit to your experience when you went there.
Well, 2017, I was invited to be part of something called Pal Lit, and it was the Palestinian Festival of Literature. But what it was so great. It was like a handful of us. I don't know, maybe six, like American and mostly American and British poets and writers. A lot of people of Middle Eastern extraction and Jewish. And myself, who is neither, we're just writers. We were just invited to go to Palestine, and we went to 5 Palestinian cities and read with Palestinian writers, and we were brought there to see. It was an
Mm.
information trip. We were brought there to meet people, to have food, to see the checkpoints. I mean, and it just it was like something, you know, I mean, I was already very, pro-Palestinian before I went, just based on what I knew. But to see I've never seen anything like it in my life. The level it was just like you'd be in a marketplace and you'd turn, and then it's like two teenagers standing there, IOF kids, like just kind of like 18-year-olds with machine guns, like laughing and flirting, but also looked like don't fuck with me. You know what I mean? Like anything could happen at any minute. And we were traveling in a very we were in a bus with Israeli plates, and we had we were traveling in a way that meant so we could travel. But as soon as we got to the airport, members of our group, one person was Palestinian American, and they pulled him aside for 4 hours. And anybody who looked Middle Eastern was just totally derailed, and you were just in another world.
Yeah. Wow. And I'm curious too about, I know your activism extends as far back as your poetry extends, and especially during like the AIDS crisis and also with your climate activism. I've seen you protesting in the East River Park. And in this topic of tonight about writing a political poem, were there strategies or skills that you've kind of carried over through different forms of activism that are facilitating this moment of writing?
Now, the facility skills from activism.
Yeah, or like ways of thinking about how to write towards the moment, like having had experienced
No, I think
different.
it's kind of the opposite. I think like I feel like the increase the more the things I care about politically are really part of my life, the more they just really become part of my work.
Hmm.
I think it's sort of like the level, to me, like the level, because it was always like when I first started to write about art, I was like, how do I write about art? But it was the more something becomes, you're in the very machinery of it, the more it's just an organic thing to talk about, as much as my sex life or being queer or my dog would be part. It's sort of like the level of engagement, and then it just becomes interesting because, of course, I still feel like with everything, I want to talk about politics, and I want you to read the poem, and I
Yeah.
want you to listen. So I just think for me, like making a speech, unless it's the speech, is doing something completely different, isn't going to make anybody listen. I think it's sort of like we're still talking about pleasure, which is
Hmm.
what's so fucked up. I think art is always engaging you in a visceral way, and so you've got to like be. I mean, like that's why it's been such an interesting workshop with oneself to figure out how to keep writing poems that are, to my mind, political and yet are poems as I understand them. And I think too, all other things, like I meditate, and there's lots of different ways of meditating, but one school of meditation that I've been using lately is I think it's insight meditation, where it's like you're sitting there and then all your garbage is coming through your head, and so you tag it and you go, I notice that I'm thinking about a cheeseburger, and it's just like, and so like by tagging it, you let go of it. And so again, that too became a new kind of rhythm. Like I know I would be sitting there and there's like, I notice I'm thinking about Palestine, and it was just like the most common refrain in my poems, so that any other structures in my life became, infused with that concern, and again, an opportunity to use it too. So all forms, all systems are
Hmm.
plunderable.
Totally. And I really feel that in the last poem that you shared, talking about like looking at it happening, all this genocide unfolding on one's phone, and that sort of whiplash of just being continually desensitized and then being in this world, and like the other poem, then like ordering the kettle.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
Each time it's just like a new way of understanding the injustice of my life and their lives, and I can't help being I'm part of the perpetrator culture. you know.
yeah, I know when we were talking about this event, we were also thinking about like what it means, what the complicity means of being. I mean, Canada is also complicit in funding this, and that standpoint, and also how do we turn to that with art, and can poetry be a tool for working through that, for building awareness around it? I'm wondering what like other reflections you were having leading up to tonight's event, kind of going through the poems you wanted to read.
Well, I just found the question of health a really good opportunity. I mean, it just because it's so wide and it's so simple, but it's so true.
Mhm.
That it's like, to make poetry is healthy. To make poetry, to make art in a wartime is healthy. To counter violence with aesthetic gestures, with love, even with focus, with precision. That looking at violence at my phone is as worthy of my art attention as all the other subjects and objects of art. It's sort of like to embrace it.
Yeah,
And so it's like it's sanity. It seems like it's sanity to meet it with everything we've got, and it's just like, and I love that, like, in such a for me, it just felt like profound to see, to feel my own activism in my own poetry, and also and to meet a poet who's, in a much more vital position and in relationship to this violence, and that she's writing poems in it. She's just, it's like, that's what we know how. That's what we know how to do. You're in it and you write poems in it, because and everybody has coping skills, and this is mine. I just come from a mentally ill family. What I do with my craziness is I became a poet.
mm. I love that. What you're saying is making me think of that passage from Inferno of yours that I read out about how much the government and the media are have perfected the skill of, you can see something but we can't really see it. And I think what I'm hearing too and what you're saying is, and art and these aesthetics gestures being a way to really see things that all these larger systematic forces that have a lot of money and power behind them are systematically concealing.
Right, right. We're sort of like unpacking the invisibility. Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel that so much, like with the poem you shared. I got to hear you read it in Ottawa, but the pot poem and the yelling at the end. I think there's a real need for that sort of embodied writing and reading right now.
Well, it feels kind of Dada. It's sort of like
Mm,
I don't think I've ever ended a poem like kind of in a rant and yelling. It's sort of like not my style, but it was just like I felt so, it was like the propulsiveness of my own, kind of the absurdity and the disgust, and it's just like it's Dada was rule one. It
yeah.
was like all the avant-garde techniques came directly out of war and violence, and you know,
It's interesting to think of the like abstraction being a response to that, to the violence. And I'm thinking about like language falling away sometimes and words like being difficult to use, but also some of the only things to make this looking happen again.
right.
It's really interesting to think about.
Yeah, and it's that famous Carl Dreyer, the filmmaker, had this great line like to use artifice to strip artifice of artifice.
Mm, I think that's an amazing closing note to end on with your reflections. That was so incredible. Thank you so much, Eileen,
Oh, well, thank you
joining
so
us
much.
tonight, and for sharing Batul's work as well, and that GoFundMe. It's so exciting to see everyone who's joined tonight also contributing to that. And like Eileen said, that book, let's get it. Um, and what else do I have to say? Yeah, I'm so grateful that you joined tonight to share your reflections on writing a healthy political poem and to share the poems on Palestine.
Thank you for inviting me so much.
It's an absolute honor. And thank you everyone for joining. Next month on Cross-Pollinations is poet Hazur Mirwali. Talon Books just put out her new book, and it's called Revolutions. It's a collection that shifts through the grains of Muslim daughterhood to reveal two metaphorical circles inextricably overlapping shame and pleasure. Kind of what you were saying too, Eileen. Hazur will be joined by therapist Zanib Abdullah, who is the founder of Wellnest. It's a therapy clinic in Toronto run by and geared toward BIPOC communities. And the duo will be discussing somatic practices of writing and healing. I also just want to share, Eileen, that you've gotten so much love in the chat throughout your reading. Online readings are always a little funny because you don't get to have the applause, but we have comments about wanting to stay up all night reading and writing,
Cool.
and lots of people writing out your lines, feeling, I think, very moved and especially appreciative for this space to gather and really think about the importance of the different ways we can offer resistance.
Thank you. Night, everybody.
Good night, everybody. Thank you so much for joining.
Poetry is my health. I love it. Thanks, Susan.
Yay. You
Yay.
keep me healthy with yours, so yay. Bye, everybody.